Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, May 12th, 2022. The time is 2:03 p.m. We will do a roll call, and I will turn that over to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Barber.
Here.
Councilmember Denson.
Here.
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Likens.
Here.
Councilmember Rodenberg will be marked as excused unless there's any objection from council. Councilmember Storsett. And Councilmember Wook.
Here.
Okay, great. And thank you to all of our staff members who are here with us. We will now go into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss the acquisition of real estate per RCW 42.30.110 (B). No action will be taken following the executive session. So council, if you could log out of this meeting and go into the executive link that was sent, and then we'll all log back onto this meeting. Thank you.
You are. I'll tell you offline now that we're recording.
Mayor's extended the executive session for another 5 minutes until 2:25 p.m. Mayor has announced that the executive session will be continued for an additional 10 minutes until 2:35 p.m.
We've returned from executive session. It is now 2:37 p.m. No action will be taken. We will go right into our first item, which is our South Sound 911 presentation. I'd like to welcome Executive Director Deborah Grady and the Chair of the Board, Julie Dorr. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're pleased to have you, and thank you for your patience in presenting today. I will turn it over to you.
Okay, and I think we have a slide deck that's going to be provided for us here and run. I'm Deborah Grady, the Executive Director of South Sound 911, and we're really excited to be here. Chair Dorr is here with me, and she has part of the presentation too. And we are just thrilled to be out and interacting with our partner agencies, their councils, just so we can share some information about South Sound 911. I'd also like to just give a shout out while you're all here to your chiefs. Chief Busey participates with South Sound 911 in various work groups that we have going on, as well as being willing to be appointed to our PSCOC, as well as your fire chief, Chief Doan, is also participating at the PSCOC level. So we thank the chiefs for that. So today what we'd like to talk about is just to give you an overview of who we are, who South Sound 911 is, the journey that we've taken to get to where we are today, along with what we actually provide in the form of the services to the citizens here in our county and our partner agencies, of which you are one. And then we'll talk just a little bit about our future. So can I have the next slide as we go into who we are? So South Sound 911 is the primary public safety answering point, or PSAP, for the 38 police and fire agencies here in the county. We provide 911 call taking and dispatch for police, fire, and medical calls for service that come into the 911 center. We also provide non-emergency call taking for our entities as well. In addition to serving the 38 agencies in Pierce County in that form, we also have a 911 program office that works directly with other secondary PSAPs in our county. And those other PSAPs at the federal level would be Joint Base Lewis McChord, also the Mount Rainier Ranger Station. At the state level, we work with WSP, the Washington State Patrol, locally with Tacoma Fire Communications, and we also work with Puyallup Tribal Police to provide good connectivity and service to all in our county. Something we also do, while our main operational function and the largest population of our employees are assigned to the communication center floor, we also provide records and technical services to our partner agencies. From the records perspective, we have a variety of areas or assignments and task work that we provide. But really the few that are large that are that we get interaction with the partner agencies pretty regularly about are the firearm transfer applications that we process, as well as the concealed pistol licensing. And the concealed pistol licensing and the firearm transactions, they really took off during the pandemic and have been at an elevated level for those agencies that we provide that service for. For Gig Harbor, the only records related function that we provide services for is under the records management system portion of the services. On technical services, the footprint that South Sound has in Pierce County is very large from a technology standpoint and also from the services that we provide. Technically, our technical staff support our 911 call taking equipment, the CAD system, radio support consoles, as well as equipment issues or technical issues that the partner agencies might have with, say, mobile units, or in some cases, some of the smaller agencies don't have help desk staff. And so we have a contract to provide IT support in a help desk format to those smaller agencies. Next slide, please. And go one more. So the journey that that South Sound has taken started in 2010 when there were 6 PSAPs public safety answering points or 911 centers here in Pierce County. The predecessor to South Sound 911 was one of those. It was referred to as LISA, the Law Enforcement Support Agency, along with the cities of Buckley, Fife, and Puyallup all had their own 911 centers. West Pierce Fire and Rescue had FireCom, and Tacoma Fire has, and still today has its own fire communications center. In 2011, members of the public safety community, along with elected officials, labor groups, and community members envisioned a collaboration to consolidate these 911 centers into what has become South Sound 911. These groups all work together to have Proposition 1, which is a 0.1% sales tax, and the foundational funding for South Sound to become an entity. They all work together to get that, that initiative on the ballot and passed. Specific uses for that 0.1% for South Sound funding are for emergency communications related initiatives such as 911 center operations, our building, which is in the picture you can see behind me, as well as radio systems operations and maintenance. That happened in 2011, the passage of Proposition 1. Between 2012 and 2015, the agency operated under a policy board and an operations board under an interlocal agreement. That is since changed, and Chair Doerr will be speaking to you about that. During that period of time, the first agency joined the consolidation, and we were off and running. Next slide, please. Is that going? Okay, I'll just continue. Oh, there it is. Between 2016 and 2021, the remaining individual PSAPs or 911 centers joined South Sound 911. During that period of time, a consultant was engaged to conduct a strategic study. Out of that recommendation, key findings were made in 3 real key areas for us. One was in call processing and the way South Sound performs answering and handling of 911 calls for service. So the recommendation was made to reduce transfers as much as possible. We've just this week are really happy and excited, proud to announce that the initiative that we refer to as universal call taking is underway and deployed. What that means is when a caller calls 911, the call taker that answers the phone call is now processing the call, whether it's a police, fire, or medical emergency. Prior to this week, calls would get transferred from one call taker to another based on the level of training that they had. In addition, a key study finding was that the agency could look at a different governance structure. Options were provided to the board in that report of what another governance structure might look like. And then another finding was that discussions could be instituted or initiated to work towards a single radio system in the county. Currently, there are 3 radio system owners. The county has a 700 megahertz radio system. City of Tacoma has an 800, and City of Puyallup operates a sub radio system under City of Tacoma's 800 system. In 2021, the last step to consolidation really was realized when we started moving into the new facility, the new South Sound 911 building on Pacific Avenue in Tacoma. Prior to this, this move, we were working out of 4 different work locations. Firecom was in Puyallup. Our law enforcement call taking and dispatch was on 35th Street in Tacoma, and our records and administrative offices were in separate buildings in downtown Tacoma across from the city county building. So all of our employees are really excited, happy, and just thrilled to be in the new building and to have us all under one roof. One of our core values is unity, and it's really hard to unify an agency when you have people working out of 4 different locations. So we can really focus on that at this point. Next slide, please. This is where I will hand off to Chair Dorr.
Thank you. My name is Julie Dorr, and I have the honor of serving as the chair of the board of directors for South Sound 911. My co-chair is Derek Young, who, as you should know, coming from Gig Harbor, is the Pierce County Council chair. Can I have the next slide, please? So our board of directors, the seats on the board are determined by the communications assessments of each agency. And so the first largest assessment is the City of Tacoma, and they are represented by board member Connor McCarthy and board member Joe Bushnell. The second largest communication is Pierce County, and the representation for Pierce County is the executive Bruce Dameyer and the county council chair Derek Young. The third largest communication assessment is Lakewood, and Councilmember Michael Branstetter represents Lakewood on that board. The fourth largest communication is Puyallup, and I am the representative for the city of Puyallup. And then the 5th, 6th, and 7th largest assessments, they share 2 seats, so they rotate every 3 years. Currently, we have the city of Fife is represented by Pat Hulsey, and the city of Sumner is represented by Mayor Kathy Pugh. The fire districts have 3 seats. The largest, first largest communication assessment is Central Pierce Fire and Rescue, and they are represented by Commissioner Holm. The second largest assessment is West Pierce. They are represented by Commissioner Dan Rankin. And then the all fire district contract agencies and small communications assessments are represented by Commissioner Pat McElligott. So we are governed by bylaws, and our, we are governed by bylaws. We have to follow the same things that you do as a local elected. We have to certify that we have met our training requirements for OPMA and the public records. And also we have a code of ethics that is required that we acknowledge and sign annually. Our meetings are held on the 4th Wednesdays of the month at the South Sound 911 office. It's 3580 Pacific Avenue. My position and Chair Young's position as chair and vice chair, those elections are held in February. We are the only 2 positions on this board that have an election cycle. And new board members come onto the board in February. We have the two committees, the finance committee, and that consists of Michael Branstetter. He's our most senior member on the council and does a very good job keeping us in line on those financial policies. Matt Holm from Central Pierce is on the committee, as am I. And we just had Connor McCarthy join the finance. So there are 4 people on that board. As mentioned previously, with the prior governance structure, we had the Ops Committee. We now have the Public Safety Communications Operations Committee. And it's really important, that partnership between the board and our chiefs. Their input is very important to me as a chair. I know it's important to co-chair or vice chair Young. But everything that we do is to make their job easier and supported. So their feedback and input is really important. The chair and I meet with the chair of the public safety, law enforcement, and then also with the chair of the fire agencies before we have our board meeting each month, so we can hear from them and get feedback and input from them. As Executive Director mentioned, we are a public development authority. We are chartered by the city of Tacoma, and it's pursuant to RCW 35.21.730 through 35.21755. As a public development authority, we do have the ability to issue debt. And we have, going with a PDA, it minimizes the liability to each individual agency. The Debbie's contact information, and I don't know if mine is, but is mine on the website, Debbie? Is the board's contact on your website?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so I do want to encourage you to reach out with any questions or comments. We had a new board member orientation, and through that process, I became aware of how little electeds knew of what we did or how we did it. For example, the protocols. People will say, well, South Sound didn't send anyone. We get those protocols from the individual chiefs, load them into our system, and so when you say a fire call, whether or not it's a medic or 2 engines, whatever is sent has been predetermined by your chief, your fire chief, and South Sound 911 follows those protocols when they send out those dispatches. And I came to understand that a lot of people did not know that piece. And the last thing I want to say is that this organization, I'm really proud of them. I'm proud of Executive Director Grady and the staff. They are there to help. They pick up their phones. They want to interact with you, as do I. So as we move forward, if there's additional information you seek or you have any questions, please pick up the phone and call. The contact information for both the board and the executive director and the staff is on the South Sound 911 website. So please don't hesitate to call with any questions or concerns that you may have. Thanks so much for allowing us to be here today. I'll toss it back to you, Debbie.
Okay, thank you. So next slide. Now we'll talk about what we do, and we'll start with our operations. Operations is our area that we refer to as all things related to 911 call processing and handling, or anything that happens on the communication center floor. So we also, in addition to answering voice calls for 911, the telecommunicators who are working the floor have the ability and technology to be able to process and respond to text to 911 calls for service. So if a citizen is in a situation where they're unable to safely make a voice call to 911, they have the ability to text to 911. On the comm center floor, we have different areas of primary radio dispatch. And so a call gets entered, comes in, whether it's a police, fire, or medical call, depending upon the call type and the jurisdiction, it gets routed to a dispatcher who will then dispatch the call. We call that action that they take based on the call as our primary radio dispatch. And those are the dispatchers that are, again, handling the initial dispatch of the call or responding to an officer as they're out making, say, a traffic stop. And as Chair Doerr mentioned, the response protocols and are collaborated with and set by the partner agencies. We have a secondary radio group that we refer to as data dispatch that work on the dispatch floor. And those are dispatchers that are going to respond to an officer's request for information. If they've made a traffic stop and they want to check an individual for wants or warrants, or they want to check and see if a piece of property is stolen, the data dispatchers are going to handle those requests so that the primary talk groups stay open and available for the dispatches of calls that are still coming in. We also have employees on the comm center floor, both on the comm center floor and record that function as telephone report takers. And so for the agencies, we offer the ability for our staff to take some reports that they designate can be taken over the phone, that they provide that service for. Next slide, please. We're showing you this slide just so you can see how our call volume has increased from last year to this year. 2021 definitely hit a new normal for South Sound 911 and our monthly call volume for 911 calls in particular. Between 2019 and 2020, we were relatively flat. People were staying home because of the pandemic. So we didn't have an increase substantially until 2021 rolled around. And then we saw a 16% increase in 911 call activity. We had not, before that time for 2021, we hadn't seen a month where we had over 50,000 911 calls coming in. And now it's pretty regular that we're seeing that level of call volume activity. We also, the state 911 office, and at a request, we wanted to see how other entities fell with 911 call answering. Were we just the only ones that were seeing the increase? And it confirmed that most 911 centers had seen call increases. And for us, as a consolidated center, as compared to any single 911 center associated to a police department, such as City of Seattle's police 911 center, or a consolidated 911 center, such as South Sound, we took the largest call volume for 911 calls in the state. Now that's not, I got asked, well, doesn't King County process or handle more 911 calls? They do collectively among 10 911 centers. They have 10 911 centers that are answering calls, but as a single 911 center, South Sound 911 handled the most volume. Next slide, please. On the support services side, as I mentioned before, we are providing public counter support, which takes appointments and handles fingerprinting requests for those concealed pistol license applications that we provide to a number of our agencies, and as well as requests for records or disclosure requests or audio, whatever a citizen might need from our agency gets handled at the front counter as the first stop. We and also in the firearm transactions that occurred in the county during the pandemic and following, those really increased substantially. We saw a 155% jump from 2019 to 2020, and those numbers have stayed high. They haven't gone back down to pre-pandemic timeframes. And so our staff are pretty busy making sure they're running the criminal history checks and the background checking that's required in order for someone to either purchase a gun or be issued a concealed pistol license. And then again, our technical services team is busy interacting with your employees if they need technical service support during their day as they're going about their duties. Next slide, please. And go one more. Just like your agencies, we have finance and HR divisions. On our budget and finance side, what this slide is intending to just share with you is the agency has 3 primary streams of revenue that come in to the agency. The first, slightly higher than the sales tax that we talked about earlier, is our allocation revenue stream that comes in. And allocation are the fees, if you will, that are assessed to the partner agencies based on a formula as to how much they will pay for South Sound 911 services. That contributes 43% of our revenue stream in total by our partner agencies. Our sales tax contributes 42% of our revenue for the year. 911 excise tax, that is the tax that is on any device that has access to call 911. Many of you probably noticed that on your own phone bills, there's a tax there. And so South Sound, that equates to 14% in 2022 of our overall budget, which is just over $50 million. When we talk about the sales tax, because it has both the sales tax and the 911 excise tax are specific use taxes, we like to share with everyone that 57% of the sales tax in 2022 is dedicated to operations, 25% is committed to paying radio bonds, or what we refer to as the radio service debt service, and 18% is to the new building that we moved into last July, that debt service for the building. Next slide, please. So this slide is just sharing with you how we're spending the funds that we collect. Half for 2022 of our expenditures are related to the communications center floor. That's our busiest, our biggest area of population of both employees and technology is what is the operations side of our agency. 17% of our expenditures are on the support services side, which is for records and IT support. And then you can see 18% goes to pay the debt service that we have. In addition to the debt service, a very small percentage of expenditure, 3%, goes to support a radio overlay to improve communications coverage out east, and also to help with fire toning and ability to page out fire entities. And then 11% of our expenditures are associated to agency administration. And we were talking just a little bit before the meeting started, while you all were in executive session with Chief Busey, and he is always right on point with what is going on for his agency. And so he shared, and just to share with you, that Gig Harbor to our collection of allocation for 2022 is just over $225,000. Next slide, please. The agency is in a very aggressive recruiting initiative so that we can increase and improve our staffing, much like we've seen throughout across our county and communities. Hiring and recruiting, retaining people has been challenging during the pandemic and following. We have 245 budgeted staff. At this point, we're currently, our current employee staff is about 219, fluctuates just a little bit as we have new classes starting. Some of our recruiting efforts, you might have seen, we're rolling around on Pierce Transit buses, as well as we had ads on iHeartMedia so that we could reach a really broad group of people. 911 centers typically across the nation have chronic staffing issues. And so we want to be the anomaly and be the 911 center that gets fully staffed and is able to maintain full staffing, just so that chronic overtime, especially mandated overtime, is reduced, and so that employees can have a work-life balance. In a 24/7 operation, especially with one where people are hearing our callers experiencing the worst day of their life, we believe that the work-life balance issue is very important for our staff. Next slide, please. We wanted to just share with you that we have a community relations team and try to have a pretty strong social media presence through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I don't know if you follow South Sound 911 or not, but these are examples of some of our posts that we do. Our team does a really fantastic job of getting current, updated posts out as regularly as they can. The bottom picture shows Chair Dorr reading to Emery, the emergency penguin, who is available to be scheduled to come out to functions for our partner agencies. I'm not sure if Chair Dorr will always agree to join Emery, but possibly she could. In addition, under community relations, we, for the first time this year, we're really appreciative. The board last year approved a full-time employee to be a 911 educator for South Sound. That employee has hit the ground running and has already been out conducting community or 911 education with schools and with community groups. So that we're really excited to have that addition to our staffing this year. And then also under community relations, this year we've started and launched a community volunteer program and are really just excited and proud that one of our neighbors in the area that the facility is located in is referred to as Lincoln South. So the chair of the Lincoln South Neighborhood Watch and partner with Safe Streets agreed to come and join us and be a community relations volunteer for us. Next slide, please. Our employees are also, they want to give back to the community and are really caring individuals. And so we have an employee-driven team called South Sound 911 Cares. And throughout the year, they take on special activities and events to try to either do toy drives, food drives, or participate in other events with our partner agencies. If ever you have a community event, we're always happy to send people out to be part of your events. Now that the pandemic's relaxed and we can get out and about, our calendars are starting to book up. So that's really good because we like to have FaceTime with people. It's so important to be out and engaged in the community. Next slide, please. So when we talk about our future, just some things that you might be interested in. We're currently have a work group of our law enforcement partners who have assigned people to come and help us on a work group that we refer to as the Records Management System or RMS Replacement Project. Our current records management system is aging and needs to be replaced. So we have this team in place to make a recommendation on a procurement of a new system and what the police agencies would like to see the next system is. We're working with regional partners in 911 to hopefully establish a better plan, practice of dealing with 911 outages. Currently, if there's a 911 outage and our calls for whatever reason are not routing across the state's emergency services network into South Sound 911, the call routing defaults to Spokane's 911 center. So between Thurston County and South King County entities, we're working on a plan to keep our 911 calls more locally. South Sound has the capacity to be able to offer those entities the ability to come up and work out of our facility should they need to have calls rerouted to another 911 center. We're remodeling the prior law enforcement call taking and dispatch facility that we refer to as 35th Street. It'll be a hot backup in that once the remodel is complete there, Tacoma Fire Communications will be leasing that space and working out of it, which will allow all the equipment to be ready and available should South Sound need to relocate from this facility for a period of time. We're always tracking next generation 911 activities or initiatives. One such that is text to 911 is the first one we rolled out. We also are involved, just are really pleased that we work with the state 911 office to improve wireless call routing. And that is up and running now, is considered part of next generation 911. And something that we keep hearing is on the horizon and will probably be available in the next couple of years is the ability for callers to send pictures or streaming video into a 911 call taker. The universal call taking initiative that has been very important to us and our stakeholders, the board and the board of directors, the universal call taking to make the callers experience on the worst day of their life as quick and efficient as possible so that calls don't get transferred. That has been deployed and is we're in day 2 of that actually this week. And we're looking forward to seeing how the 988 roll out for what used to be the 10-digit calling number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. That is now going to be rolled to 988, will take its place. And it's not just for suicide prevention, but also for those in mental health crisis. So we've reached out to the state and just offered to pilot a co-location with the 988 staff, however that looks and rolls out. And so we're hoping that that might be something we get to partner with in the future. Also regarding mental health calls and those in mental health crisis, we're going to be asking for a pilot with MultiCare to include a clinician on the comm center floor to take pre-screened calls to hopefully help people that are either frequent callers or might be able to reduce dispatches to people if the mental health clinician is able to talk them through whatever situation is going on at that time. And then June of this year, we are having a strategic retreat. 2 bonds will be paid off by the end of 2023 from the 0.1% money. And so it's time for the agency to get the board and stakeholders together to talk about the future of the agency, what initiatives are next for us, what funding looks like into the future. We know the partner agencies have are on the radio systems, this what are called the subscriber units, either portables or mobile radios in the cars or on the officers and firefighters are coming up on end of support. And that's a pretty big expenditure countywide, estimated to be between $40 and $50 million. So we want to get everybody together and have a discussion about what that looks like so that we can participate in those discussions about funding needs for the agencies. Then the next slide is just questions. If you have questions for myself or Chair Dorr, we're happy to answer any. And I see hands going up.
Yes, Councilmember Denton.
Thank you. I actually have 2, but I'll do one now and maybe I can come back to the other one. First, I just wanted to say, well, thank you for the presentation. And I've actually heard really good things about career opportunities at South Sound 911. I can't remember who told me, but they were just really raving about the opportunities and the work environment. So well done there. My question is, as you mentioned, as we all know, a lot of our local law enforcement officers are understaffed, really down on officers and deputies. So could you help me understand a little bit better about how you triage and prioritize calls that come in, how that works? And do you have to tell people that they're just going to have to wait a while or they need to report their crimes online? How does all that work?
So depending upon the agency, the protocols can be different for Gig Harbor than they can be for, say, City of Tacoma, Lakewood, or Pierce County. So the protocols for responses and what type of calls are either online reports or could be telephone reports really are dependent upon how the agency, how that particular partner agency wishes to respond. And so calls are triaged based on call type and priority of the call. Of course, in progress, emergency calls received that are of life safety threat or issue to people, those take the highest priority. Depending upon the agency's resources and allocation of patrol or field responses will determine how long the call potentially will pend before it gets dispatched, or if, say, for example, a call requires 2 units to go to it, and 1 unit is free, but the other one is not, we can't dispatch the call for that agency if the protocol is 2 units must go to that particular call. We do have a policy at South Sound that if a call is pending, that the caller gets a notification that the call is still pending. but we don't want people to think that the call has just dropped off on an hourly basis. And as you might imagine, with shortages in the field and calls increasing, when we see 911 calls increasing, we know that that means there's increases to you. If people either have to call back or we call them back and the response is delayed, they're not particularly happy with our folks delivering that message.
Debbie, I apologize if I missed this. When a jurisdiction does not have the resources to respond to a call, the call is still dispatched. They're still aware of the call.
Correct. It is still routed to the dispatcher for assignment as soon as the units become available for that particular call.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Wood.
Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. It was really informative and very good. In 2018, I believe, I took the Gig Harbor Citizens Police Academy and we visited 911 call center. And I'm sure you're very happy to be in a new building. And I was just in awe of your staff and what that room looks like 24 hours a day, and how calls are handled, and the calmness and the efficiency which each call is handled. So thank you for that, for just citizens who are out here calling you on the worst day of our lives. Thank you for being there and handling in such a great way. I have a strange question for you. We've been talking a lot about wildland fires in Gig Harbor, and our fire chief has said that his what keeps him up at night is evacuation plans for Gig Harbor. Does 911 ever get involved during evacuations of cities and things like that?
That would be up to the jurisdiction to handle.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you. And thank you again for the presentation. I was also there with Jenny in 2018 and was very impressed with the absolute calmness that these people were taking calls. It was very impressive. Just a quick question. The pretty substantial increase you saw in call volumes from 2019 to actually 2020 to 2021. I'm assuming you're seeing a similar level of calls from 2021 to 2022 based on your predictions. And can you let us know where most of the calls, not where, but what kind of category? I don't know if you categorize them, but are you getting, let's just say, 15% more calls for things that aren't really emergencies, like my cat's up the tree, I need the fire department, or is it someone's about ready to break into my house with a gun or whatnot? Is it more violent crime, or is it just everything across the board?
It tends to be more on the level of people feeling that their call is violent in nature or is an emergency. We reported out to the board. I was trying to pull it up here. Just some increases that we have seen so far, just so that the board was aware of why the calls were actually increasing. And we had seen some pretty substantial increases in things like shooting calls had gone up a pretty substantial amount. I want to say over 100%. Robberies have gone up. Stolen vehicles have gone up. Business burglaries, just a number of what we would consider a higher level call for service. We've seen some pretty good or pretty substantial increases in those. So the call volume is reflective of the increases in those calls that we are seeing.
Thanks. Scary, unfortunately, but.
This.
I'll step in here. Mayor Markley had to step away from the meeting for a few minutes to address something. So Councilmember Denson, you are up as acting chair. I think, I don't know if there are other questions for
Mayor Pro Tem, if I may,
Yes, Chief.
Yes, I just wanted to recognize the job that South Sound does for us. As Director Grady mentioned, we pay them, maybe $250,000 a year in various fees and stuff. And that is an unbelievable deal for the professional response and services that we get. That also includes the report writing system, the records management system that we utilize. But one thing that I don't think that the director touched on was that South Sound 911 has used some of their reserve funds over the last several years to buy down our radio access fees. We have to pay the county to access our the radios to their system. And that's quite expensive. And South Sound has stepped in to mitigate that for all of the agencies in the county. So it's kind of a unseen benefit to us as a city and something that we'll have to address moving forward. But again, overall, great staff to work with and about the most professional dispatchers you could ever hope for.
Thank you, Chief. And you'd be willing to bring any of your council members who wanted to for a tour of the new facility?
Yeah, the last time you did an orientation, I think it conflicted with a council meeting for us. So I didn't really advertise that to them much, but if you have another orientation date that's not on a Monday, that would probably be beneficial.
We just set it up whenever it works well for your schedules. The next new board member orientation will happen in probably March of 2023.
Looks like we have another question from Councilmember Wook.
Yeah, thank you. Our council members are attending our farmers market this summer, and we're all taking a turn down there with table and contacting our citizens who come to the very popular farmers market. And it might be a lovely an outreach place for 911 to answer questions from our community. If you're at all interested in that, I can try to put you together with, or perhaps our city clerk can try to put you together with Laura, who's our tourism director.
I'll jump in and just let you know that South Sound's outreach team has reached out to us already, and they're going to be at our National Night Out.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping that Councilmember Wook can wear the, is it a penguin suit? Is that what Emery was? Yeah.
I do have a penguin hat, but there you go.
That'll teach you to make suggestions. All right, well, I think if that's all the questions, thank you so much, Ms. Grady and Chair Dorr. We appreciate the partnership with South Sound 911. And Josh, shall we move on to the next item on the agenda?
Yeah, we might be due for a quick recess.
Okay, well, why don't we take a quick 5-minute recess, and I'm hoping that Mayor Markley will be back by then.
Okay, welcome back to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, May 12th, 2022. The time is 3:29 p.m. We are on our second discussion item, which is our 2023 to 2028 6-year transportation improvement program. And this presentation will be by our interim city engineer, Aaron Holst. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Aaron Holst. I am a senior engineer here at the city. Today, we're here to talk about the proposed 2023 to 2028 6-year transportation improvement program, otherwise known as the TIP. Wanted to begin today by going over the document in your packet titled, "What is the TIP?" So Josh, if you have the ability to pull that up, that'd be great. If we could zoom in a little bit on it. So what is the city's 6-year transportation improvement program, or the TIP? First of all, it's the city's near-term list of transportation projects that are proposed to happen over the next 6 years. It's a planning document that Engineering Public Works updates yearly in June, and it's adopted via resolution by City Council. It's a requirement of the RCW, or the Revised Code of Washington. It's a useful tool for the Public Works Department when we're applying for federal or state grant applications. It's a document in the form of a map and a report. That report you will not see today in your packets, but you will see at the June 13th City Council packet that follows the WSDOT format for entering projects into the state TIP, or the STIP. Per RCW 357710, a new project can only be added to the TIP if that TIP is consistent with the city's transportation comprehensive plan. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then I just listed some typical characteristics here of a TIP project that are high on the list. Example, TIP projects 1 through 3. So a TIP project number 1 through 3 will typically have some of the following characteristics. The project's budgeted by City Council. The project has received federal or state grants that have timelines/deadlines. The project's anticipated to begin before other projects in the TIP list. And the project has shown in the traffic model to have some of the largest benefit to vehicular or pedestrian level service. And similarly, it's typical for a project that is low on the TIP list. Example for this TIP would be project 24 through 26 to have some of the following characteristics. The project's not yet budgeted by City Council. The project has not applied for or received federal or state grants. And the project is anticipated to happen late in the 6-year TIP timeframe. In this case, that would be 2027 or 2028. So what the 6-year transportation improvement program is not is a complete list of projects that are set in stone. And it's also not a commitment by the city to spend money on any particular transportation project. So commitment to fund transportation projects is typically decided during the budgeting process, and we'll kind of get to that in a flow chart that I'll show you here in a minute as well. So yeah, if we could move down, and can you show that whole thing, Josh, or? Thank you. So yeah, this is just a graphic we put together. It's titled The Progression of a Transportation Project. And what it's meant to demonstrate here is points where City Council has the opportunity for input on a transportation project with the city. So starting from the left here, the transportation element of the comp plan is called out. And down on the bottom, so every 10 years, we're required to update the TE of the comp plan or the transportation element. And this transportation element of the comp plan really takes a very extensive look at the city's transportation network as a whole. It always includes taking fresh traffic counts at all intersections citywide. It includes extensive transportation modeling, and also included as part of this comp plan update is typically what we call an active transportation plan. On our last round in 2018, it was called Gig on the Go, but that is part of this transportation comp plan update as well, typically, and that kind of addresses some of the pedestrian connectivity and pedestrian related projects such as sidewalks, bike lanes, shared use path, things like that. So that is definitely one point that the council has input on a transportation project. So moving to the right here, the next point for input is the 6-year TIP, and that's where we're at today. And like I said previously, that's the city's near-term planning document that identifies a list of planned transportation projects over the next 6 years. One important fact here is that to have a project on the TIP, it's required by RCW to be consistent with projects that were outlined in the TE of the comprehensive plan or the ATP. So to put a project on the TIP, we need to be pulling it from the comprehensive plan list of projects. Moving on to the right here, the city's budget process, as you're all familiar with. So during the budget process is when City Council determines which projects to fund in the upcoming budget cycle. And then the final point of input is contract award. And yeah, that's when a designer construction contract to award to either a design firm or a construction contractor comes to City Council for approval. So yeah, hopefully this slide is helpful to kind of show the progression of a transportation project. Next, I think, yeah, if we could scroll down to this comparison list. So this is just a list we put together. This was for Comparing last year's tip to this year's tip, and there were not too many changes. So the only changes are listed in the column under 2023 tip, and there were 3 projects that were removed. 38th Avenue Phase 1A was complete and removed, and both of the Stinson projects are definitely anticipated to be complete by 2023. So we as Public Works were comfortable taking those off of there now. And the other, I'd say, minor change that was made was to 2023 tip project number 2. That's Oregon Boulevard SR16 westbound off-ramp metering. That has been a tip project for a long time. However, we added 1 word to that, and it's at the end of that, and it's study. So what we need to do is collect new traffic data, because a lot of things have changed over the next few years, to kind of get some information to figure out how we need to begin designing that project. So that's a summary of the only changes that are proposed to the 2023 tip for this year. And then the last item I wanted to show you is our tip map. And this is generally what our tip map looks like. And this identifies all those projects that you saw on that previous comparison list, but just in a map format. And the lines on the map are roadway segment projects. So sidewalk projects, roadway widening projects, you name it. And then the dots or the bullets on the map are typically identifying intersection projects. I mentioned before that there will also be, with the June 13th council packets, there is an extensive tip report that we put together. It's part of the WSDOT process for getting our tip projects included on the STIP, and it's something that we do annually. So you will see that report with your June 13th council packet, and that report will include very detailed funding assumptions and predicted project timelines. So you'll see if it's a project that we were awarded grants for, you'll see that amount listed under that report. If it's a project that we're planning on getting grants for, you'll see kind of predictions for how much we're thinking that grant might be. And similarly, you'll see local funds assigned to a lot of these projects as well. So that is all I had prepared for this afternoon, and I'm definitely here and available to answer questions if there are any.
Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you. Thanks, Aaron. That was a very well done report. I have a couple quick questions for you. Going back to the transportation element of the comp plan, it's supposed to be updated every 10 years. The gig on the go was done in 2018. So are you saying that that wouldn't be updated until 2028, or would that be updated a little bit more often than that, or sooner perhaps?
Yeah, I can briefly speak to that. I know from speaking to Katrina that our plan is to update the transportation element by end of 2024. And so we as Engineering Public Works, we're beginning our effort to collect traffic counts by this fall. So spring and fall are typically a good time to get traffic counts because school's in session, and it's generally the best time of year to do that. So we're beginning that on our end this fall, and maybe Katrina could speak a little bit to the timing of why we're doing it, why it doesn't seem like it's a 10-year timeline since we last did it in 2018.
You did a good job explaining it, Aaron. But for council that wasn't here back then, we did update, as Aaron said, in 2018 with the transportation element and gig on the go, the non-motorized plan. The reason that was done in 2018 is the transportation element of the city's comprehensive plan was found inconsistent with Vision 2040 at that point, and it was remanded back for some modifications for transportation concurrency and planning. And so that work was undertaken in 16, 17 and adopted in 18. So it only appears that it's an 8-year cycle. However, it was for a 16 effort. And so, as Aaron said, the new transportation element will be due by December 31st of 2024. And we'll begin working on that in conjunction with Jeff and Aaron and his team next year as part of the comp plan periodic update.
Okay, so I was hearing about traffic counts, and okay, I understand that vehicular traffic is going to be part of it, but how do we plan to update things like cycling and pedestrian needs or access or whatnot? I mean, that vehicles are a portion of this, but transportation plan should include everything as well as cars.
Yeah, and I can speak to that a little bit. There's definitely different ways to manage putting together an ATP or an active transportation plan. You can do bicycle and pedestrian counts. That can be part of it. I could speak a little bit to how we did it last time. How we did it last time, we assigned a pedestrian level of service to sidewalks. And for example, if there was sidewalk on both sides of a roadway, that level of service assumption was green. If there was sidewalks on one side of the roadway, the level of service assumption was yellow. And if there were sidewalks on neither side of the roadway, the level of service for pedestrians was red. So there's a lot of different ways you can put together an active transportation plan, and council would definitely be involved in that process and have input on it.
All right, yeah, that'd be good. Last real quick question, the tip number, who comes up with that?
Yeah, great question. And I kind of tried to explain that a little bit at the end of here. Let me try and get it pulled up again. But yeah, Josh, if you could share that PDF one more time, would be great. And scroll and zoom in on the end of that. What is the tip there? But yeah, I mean, it starts with engineering public works putting together the tip annually. It's fairly typical with the city of Gig Harbor that we don't have extensive changes to the tip. So a lot of this is just from the numbering is basically from last year's tip. To answer part of your question, I mean, if you look at this first example, a project high on the tip has those characteristics. So when I'm looking at this, or whoever's putting together the tip is looking at this, as far as numbering the tip, if a project's budgeted by council, if it's under construction, if it's about to be under construction, that project is going to be extremely high on the tip. It's going to be 1 through 3 or 1 through 5, or it's going to be up there. If a project's not budgeted, it has some potential improvements to vehicular level of service, but maybe not the highest of all the projects on the tip. It's not funded, it hasn't received federal grants. That project will be closer to the end of the tip. And there's obviously tip project numbering that's in the middle. But it starts in public works every year, and we bring it to council for feedback and for recommendations.
Okay, thanks. We'll have to chat about the tip sometime. Thanks.
Councilmember Barber.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate the introduction to tips. I guess I have a couple questions, and the first one is probably more education for me. Like the Prentice improvements that we're talking about later today are not on this tip, and I'm wondering why. And then my second question is, how do we identify the projects that were in the Gig on the Go transportation plan versus ones that are purely automobile, I'll call them. You know, one of the things in the pros plan was we wanted to talk about connectivity of trails and walkability and that kind of thing. And I'm trying to figure out, based on this tip plan, where those are appearing. And I understand that some of it may be timing, but how do we work through that, and how do we know where those elements are tying in? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, both the Gig on the Go, the active transportation plan, and the TE have a project list within them. I think it's easiest to access via the city website. I typically just go in and type in 2018 transportation element, and it comes up, and you can easily find the project list. And then Similarly, with the ATP or Gig on the Go, there's a comprehensive list of pedestrian projects. And to answer your first question, and Prentice Fenimore, I think, and maybe Jeff, you might speak to this a little bit, but I know that one isn't on the tip, but there's a pedestrian element to that project. So there is projects in our TE and in our active transportation plan that speak generally to projects in a certain corridor of the city. So there's definitely projects that call out sidewalk improvements, for example, to any area in the city holistically with level of service yellow or worse, as defined by the active transportation plan.
Okay,
So I don't know if that answers your question.
enough to probably further confuse me, but we'll talk offline.
Well, and we can definitely, and Stephanie's going to be making a presentation after this on the Prentice Fenimore. We can definitely add that to the tip this year because it is that project is classified as a pedestrian improvement project per the transportation element active transportation plan. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Wook?
Yes, thank you. So regarding the Prentice Fenimore project, it's so the sidewalk will go to Prentice and then it will come down Fenimore, and then there will be a crossing lane, a crossing area with a rapid flashing beacon, taking the children over to Peacock, the sidewalk on the east side of Peacock. Or is that the east side? And if those kids walk up Peacock, they're going to get to about Ringgold, a little bit beyond Ringgold, and there'll be sidewalk on the other side on the west side of Peacock. And then just after Ringgold and after that corporate development up there, the sidewalk disappears until just before Apollo, and we have just street up there. And so there is, do you put a sidewalk in that small of an area? I assume we don't want to put a sidewalk all the way down Peacock on that side because we've got a sidewalk on the other side of Peacock. So what is the plan for handling those kids and pedestrians from Apollo to Ringgold? Have we thought about that at all?
And I'd ask Jeff or Stephanie to speak to that particular project, if you could.
Yeah, I want to, that's a good point, Councilmember Wook, but I mean, it's just like the 38th Avenue project. These projects cost so much money, we have to take them off in bits and pieces. And I think that, I mean, we're adding over 1,000 feet of sidewalk with the Prentice Fenimore. We're then able to connect that up and have over 1,000 feet more total added to the current sidewalk inventory in this area. So you've got now 2,000 feet of sidewalk that kids can walk on for those arterial roadways. Of course, the other local roadways still don't have any sidewalk around there, but you've significantly increased that area. And we don't typically have kids walking over half mile anymore. Some do, but very few. But I think it's just something that the council is gonna continue to, if they want to be able to fund these types of projects, continue the extension of these sidewalk gap projects. I know we've heard for a while about Peacock Hill. And I think that that's definitely something that the council can prioritize through the TIP. They can prioritize through the budget process, and that is covered already under the project descriptions that Aaron discussed and the TE and the active transportation plan.
So then that gap up there, between sort of Ringgold and Apollo, can it qualify for a gap grant?
It could, yes. It depends on the grant process that we go through. I don't know if, again, in some of these grant applications, we have to be very careful that we're applying for a grant that actually is, that our project meets all of the qualifications for. We're stuck for a lot of our TIB projects, or grant applications that we're doing half width roadway improvements. We're not doing sidewalk gaps anymore. The previous councils have told us stop doing sidewalk gaps, meaning stop just putting in sidewalks, which is what we've been successful with TIB grants before. The other program the TIB has is arterial roadway program. And therefore, and under that, we're doing a full roadway sections, edge of right of way to edge of right of way. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about half of a roadway. And so we don't have very many grants that allow you to build half of a roadway.
Okay, so hopefully we can continue this conversation, I guess, as we get closer to budget. And so I have another question. If you could remind me a little bit about the Hunt overpass that was eliminated, I think, from the TIF project. It was, am I correct in thinking that if we ever want to do an overpass, it has to be on this TIP list? Otherwise, and it has to stay there for a long time, otherwise the state sort of discounts that we're serious about this project?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So yeah, as mentioned, it definitely needs to be identified in the TE during the comprehensive plan update. So that's the starting point. If we're looking at a high dollar project such as that, it's going to need to be on the TE list. That's the first step. And then you start to think about, okay, is that project going to be partially funded in the next 6 years? If design, or if there's any studies that are going to be done within the next 6 years, then yes, that project would be appropriate to add to the 6-year TIP. If there wasn't going to be anything done or any money spent over the next 6 years, then we wouldn't want to put it on there quite yet. It would just be on our long range project list in the TE.
Thank you. That explains a lot. So I appreciate that a lot. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I hate to beat a dead horse, but I think I've been asking about Peacock Hill sidewalks for at least 2 and maybe 3 years. And Councilmember Wook, thank you so much for bringing it up. She makes an excellent point about kids, but there's also lots of adults that use that as a way to get from Gig Harbor North. Yes, like Councilmember Henderson, and I've walked with Councilmember Henderson's wife before from Gig Harbor North downtown and vice versa. It's a great corridor for our Gig Harbor North residents and downtown residents to get up north. So I know grants are a challenge and we don't know exactly what the plan is or how we'll fund it, but I'd like to see it on this list. Even at the end of the list, can we just put it on the list? And that would make me so happy. And I think other residents happy. And then we can figure out how and when it's going to get done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I have our pedestrian level of service map pulled up. And as I mentioned, the TE does speak to, we could have a pedestrian project on our TIP if it meets the definition of improving a sidewalk that is currently red. So I'm not sure exactly where you're looking at getting those sidewalks to and from, what the cross streets are, but I do have a map here that identifies where there are sidewalks on neither side of the street and sidewalks on one side of the street on Peacock.
Aaron, would you mind sharing that map?
Yeah, I can do that here. Do I have permissions, Josh?
Yeah, you should have a green box at the bottom of your Zoom screen.
Okay, great. I got it here.
And I think we're realistic that we are just right now looking for sidewalks on one side of the street. If we can accomplish that, that would be awesome.
So can you see this map here?
Yes.
Okay, so on the left-hand side here, so this is from Figure 18 pedestrian level of service from our Gig on the Go, our active transportation plan. So this is the pedestrian level of service for sidewalks that I'd mentioned, and this identifies whether it's red, yellow, or green. So green is, and this is not current, it's been since 2018, but green is for both sides of the street, yellow is where there's sidewalks one side of the street, and red is for where there's sidewalks on neither side of the street. So
Aaron, that chunk on Peacock Hill, right where you got your cursor is what Robin's talking about and Jenny's talking about, and I've been talking about too. That has no sidewalks on either side of the street. Unfortunately, it's a bit of Peacock that people drive pretty fast on. It's straight. The trees have been pulled back away from, so people are ripping down that, even though I know it's posted 35 miles an hour and in some cases 25. But it's somewhat on the scary side to be walking there, and I'm sure that's not the only road, but that is the segment and section that could use a would probably have to be on the west side because that would connect to more. Otherwise, if it's on the right side, the sidewalk flips back and forth, and having kids crossing that would be not a real good idea, but so that's one.
Okay, and yeah, I mentioned the project definitely has to be mentioned in the TE or ATP of the comprehensive plan. So this red section would be consistent with that. So we could add it to the tip. There's one other thing that we have to consider when adding projects to the tip. With the tip, we have to do SEPA. So how we've been adopting SEPA every year is the Community Development Department does it through addendum. So I would just have to check in with Katrina and see if, since we're planning on adopting SEPA via an addendum based on previous year's tips and based on the 2018 comp plan work, are we okay to add this project?
Great. Councilmember Storsett, I believe.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'll continue to beat the dead horse on this one. I'm also, in favor of these sidewalks. And, just taking Peacock, for example, some of those sections indicate there's sidewalks on both sides. Some of them are just an extension of the road, like on the lower end of Peacock on the west side. Yes, west side. And, just for safety concerns, not having a curb there that, does provide somewhat of a sense of security. Sorry, it's hailing. I don't know if hopefully you guys can hear me. It's dumping in my backyard right now. So I just think it's definitely something we should look at. Other things that just pop out to me that I think probably as like most citizens would see it, not seeing this full plan is when we see paths on the side of the road, right? That are like trails, you see the grass growing up on each side. That's an obvious indicator of a need for a sidewalk. And I know we're going to talk a bit more about Burnham Drive and that section there, but that's definitely one with the new neighborhoods, Gig Harbor North. A lot of them connect through that way into downtown. So I definitely think some improvements there are needed, one side or the other. And even where we have, you go back to Peacock and we have some on the east, some on the west. We don't want people crossing the road, right? We want to try to avoid that. But I think there is some opportunities there if we, getting sidewalks on both sides. Honestly, I think that would be a big one. I think probably can't do this on like a sound view, which I think is very similar, the hill to hill. I don't want to cut into Councilmember Barber's, backyard, but those are things that we have to look at. And I think there is some slowing measures that we can do with, with the speed and the transition from, 35 miles an hour to 25, as Henderson was saying. But the idea is to slow it down and then keep people on one side or the other until they have to cross. Also, I love the point earlier that, this isn't just kids, this is, adults as well. There's also, these are our routes for public transit. So we have, I'd be curious, the same way we look at traffic on the roads and we monitor, what the flow is. Is there a way that we do that for people? I don't know, like to get a count of like, well, how many people are utilizing this area? Maybe it's just a little push button thing or something, but something to consider. I also love to hear from the community, I think on this one too, because it sounds like we've got a pretty strong consensus around pedestrian safety and, having people walking and biking to and from. So I think we should definitely dive in on this one more. Thanks.
Councilmember Likens.
Yes, thanks. Seth kind of brought up what I was going to bring up about the pedestrian numbers or just routes or walking through the city and see how we move, because up here in Gig Harbor North, there are so many people that walk, and I so frequently hear from people, how do I walk to downtown? How do I safely get to downtown?
Now, in the Burnham Drive project, that's going to have sidewalk, correct? All the way down, and that's high up. So at least if we go down from down by the Y to the new traffic circle and then can come down Burnham, would that be a complete pedestrian route from north to south and vice versa?
It would, it wouldn't all be ADA compliant, but it would go
Okay.
down Burnham to the intersection with Harborview in front of Hi-U-Hi-Hi, and you could continue down Burnham sidewalks all the way past Prentice and down to North Harborview.
Okay, great. I've been saying that to people, so I'm really glad I was right on that. But I also agree, I think prioritizing pedestrian access, you know, people want to connect, go downtown, and then downtown people want to walk up to North, especially if we have our new sports complex to walk to in the parks. So, okay, thanks.
Councilmember Look.
Yes, so if we're going to look at that block up at on Peacock, and if the bottom part on the west side of Peacock does not meet our need for sidewalks, then as long as we're looking at the upper part, let's look at I think maybe we need to consider a rapid flashing crossing beacons to get people to the other side up there, like we're doing down at Fenmore to get people to cross Peacock at that point as well. Let's think about that same crossing mechanism for up closer to the top of the hill as well. Thanks.
Councilmember Henderson.
It's clear there's a lot of support for pedestrian access, cycling. I think though, and Jeff and I have talked about this, about kind of getting a study to prioritize where we want to put sidewalks. I mean, we've all talked about Peacock Hill, but I'm sure there's other citizens down in Uptown that say, wait a minute, we've been waiting for 25 years and haven't gotten anything, or other parts that it seems like a good prioritized list of where we need sidewalks would be good, so we can start to plan and focus on where we're going to go. I think Seth brought up a great idea, is that part of looking is where people walk. I mean, that's where people struggle. I mean, when I walk down Burnham, I'm walking in that little path along there, which is being done. Or if I'm walking on the Peacock Hill, I'm also walking on part of the side of the road. You just have to look at that kind of stuff and say, people need something there, because there's, you know, if there's no path, then people aren't going there. Now, that doesn't mean it isn't needed, but you know, Jeff, I'm sorry you're thinking, why you got a lot of stuff on your plate, but I think we should seriously consider that funding to get a study like that, so we can at least get a list of here's where we're missing it, and as close as we can. I mean, there's even areas where we've got sidewalks that are in bad shape, and that in itself might result in a poor level of service. I mean, some sidewalks are too narrow, they're broken up just because it's there. So that would be my one recommendation, is let's think about that, because that way we can really focus in and get it something in the hopper. But I like this discussion. It's just great. I'm happy to hear so much support for this too.
And what I'm hearing is that this Peacock Hill corridor and pedestrian improvements, bicycle improvements is a high priority for majority or all of council. And so we can definitely, as Aaron said, look at adding that to the tip, defining at least initially tip project that will provide for design and permitting, and talked with Community Development Director Knutson to see if the SEPA addendum will capture that, because it's in the TE already, or if we need to do something more and do a full SEPA amendment for a non-project action. I do want to mention, as Councilmember Henderson said, we've talked about this. It's also, when it comes to budget season, that's the time to prioritize these. But just a reminder that we have a lot on our plates, and so it's going to be council's decision of how to prioritize these things. Staff will take them in whatever direction we receive from council. So just if you can be ready to prioritize what something might have to fall off the list. So, yeah.
Councilmember Likens.
Yes, just really quick, that map that was shared with the pedestrians with the yellow, red, green, can you send that out to council?
Yeah,
Just to have-
would you like just the map or the entire active transportation plan?
No, just the map part of it. I have that whole plan, but that's a nice visual just to have for all of us as we're looking at towards budget season. So, and appreciate all that you both do. I know your plates are full and we're just keeping you on your toes again. I'm so sorry. So thank you.
No problem. I'll send it out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Aaron, and thank you to Jeff. If there's no further questions on this item, we'll move on to item 3, which is our Burnham Drive half-width roadway improvement phase 1A mitigation plan. And this is our associate engineer, Marcos McGraw, who will be giving us this presentation. Welcome, Marcos.
Thank you. I'm pleased to participate in this meeting with you. I will focus on the memo and exhibits that were provided relative to this presentation. Thank you, Josh. In November of 2021, we submitted permit applications to state and federal agencies for this Burnham Drive project. In response, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers responded by requesting that we provide a mitigation plan for the impacts caused by the project to sensitive areas. We investigated a couple of city-owned parcels near the project limits, and we concluded the most viable parcel for the required mitigation is located just west of the sewer treatment plant. And that is shown on one of the exhibits. If you could move to the exhibits, Josh. This exhibit shows the sensitive areas that we're trying to mitigate. You can see the blue and red areas along the street. And the next page shows the continuation of those sensitive areas. The sensitive areas in blue and red is what we're focusing on. The areas in pink and red is where the culvert is being replaced. And under the permit that we're working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, that project is essentially self-mitigating. So the mitigation that we're trying to deal with in resolving the concern with the Corps of Engineers is just the area that's in light blue. We came up with 2 options. And Josh, if you could go to the next exhibit, please. And both these options are relative to this parcel number 221064046, which is the parcel just west of the treatment plant. Option 1 will preserve the area of this parcel located west of the Cushman Trail under a conservation easement in combination with enhancing the existing wetlands on that part of the parcel by removing invasive species and planting native trees and shrubs. Well, some of the concern that we came up with this is that essentially that will be a little bit more cost than just preserving it with a conservation easement. And if we use the area west of the Cushman Trail there, as shown on this exhibit, we will have to do both a conservation easement and some small improvements. The benefits of this option is that it's already under a limited availability because the part of the parcel is west of the Tacoma Power Utility property and west of the Cushman Trail. So basically it's landlocked, which restricts future use of this area of the parcel. Option 2 that we're considering is to preserve the area of this same parcel located just west of the treatment plant under a conservation easement. And when our consultant went out and looked at this area of the parcel, it's shown on this exhibit as the high quality forested wetland and the light blue hatching. The consultant said that it is of similar or same value of area that we are impacting with the project. So essentially, we would just preserve this area of the property under some sort of easement, a conservation easement. And the consultant suggested that no improvements to this area of the parcel would be required. The concern is that if at any future time we wanted to expand the treatment plant or otherwise use this area of the parcel, it would be difficult to remove that conservation easement and expand the treatment plant or otherwise use this area of the parcel. Now, the benefits is that it would be a slightly lower cost because we would not be doing any improvements. At this point, I'm willing to take any questions and ultimately would like recommendation from council on one of the two options.
Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Marcus. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So your option 1 is just that little area. Well, let's go back to the map would be the best.
Oh.
So you're saying that option 1 would just be that little parcel to the, I'll call it to the left, but I guess it's the west if north is straight up on the map on this picture, then to the west of the Cushman Power Line Trail, that's option number 1, right?
Correct.
Just that little piece there, not the whole entire parcel itself. Okay.
That is correct.
And then option number 2 is just that area that's hatched that is higher quality. So I guess the question I would have is, you said that option number 1 results in additional construction costs. I don't know how much those are. So I don't know whether it's $5.13 or $500,000 more. So that we would probably need that to be able to assess whether option 1 is better than 2. I see the problem with option 2. I mean, it's a high quality ecosystem there, but it also prevents expansion of the treatment plant. And I have to turn to Jeff to say, what's the possibility of us having to expand the treatment plant to the westerly direction?
Oh, well, speaking to that last question, Councilmember Henderson, there's a low likelihood we would need to expand the treatment plant further west, but it is possible. The building you see for the treatment plant that has the words treatment plant over it on your screen is the headworks. That's the highest point on the site, and it's where all of the sewer gets pumped up to and flows downhill from there. So if we were ever to utilize the property just west of the treatment plant for treatment plant purposes, we would have to then go through a major restructuring of the treatment plant to pump sewer back up further up the hill. What would more likely come to this area is smaller operations and storage yards and other parts of the treatment process that don't need to be along the main corridor or the main line of the treatment plant.
Okay, so it's possible, but not highly probable.
Correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't walked that. Is that pretty steep?
It is. It's fairly steep.
I mean, even putting anything there would be probably a considerable challenge from an engineering construction point of view.
Yes, it's not so steep that it would be unattainable, but it's not flat.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think for me, I mean, to know what what guidance to provide. We'd have to have some information on if there's what the additional cost would be to mitigate, or not mitigate, but to enhance that option 1.
Marcos, do you have a relative ratio of costs or even on either one of these
Nope.
options?
We have not estimated the costs involved, and essentially the only cost that we're speaking of is the amount of effort that it would take to remove invasive species on that area that is left of the Cushman Trail, as well as plant back native species. That would be the cost difference. And those costs have not been estimated because we're unsure of which direction we would go. And we anticipated that other parcels might be available, but they are not. And so we're just now investigating these 2 options.
So remove, but if the total scope of work on either location is removing invasive species, you're talking, these are 10, 20, these are tens of thousands of dollars of work, not hundreds of thousands.
Correct.
And
And the area that is highlighted with the light blue hatching, according to the consultant's analysis, there would not need to be any invasive species removed nor native species planted, that we would just need to put in the conservation easement.
right. Okay.
Councilmember Wook?
Thank you. So there's no cost involved with option 2 with the hatching, correct?
Correct.
And so if the treatment plant is not able to expand, is that going to limit development within the city?
Well, right now, the treatment plant, it has a layout that is sized to treat all sewer flows within the urban growth area and city limits based on current zoning.
Based on
But-
current zoning.
Yeah, but if zoning densities increase and or if treatment requirements increase, for example, the Puget Sound general nutrient permit requirements that are coming on us, then we need to look at adding new processes.
Or maybe
So-
not so many houses?
Well, or not so many houses, but the treatment plant was sized when East Gig Harbor was in our UGA. So there was anticipation that all of the East Gig Harbor UGA would come into the treatment plant, and that has been removed. And so we have to readjust our capacity predictions, which we can be able to accommodate even more than what we originally anticipated.
So we can anticipate, I mean, we can accommodate quite a lot with the current layout of the treatment plant.
Yes, as long as the additional permit requirements don't keep us from having to reduce our capacity.
So I'm in favor of option 2. Thank you.
Councilmember Barber?
I'm in favor of option 1. I know it costs more, but I like the idea of removing invasive species and planting natural plants on the Cushman Trail. I think that kind of gives us an extra win because it enhances an area that gets a lot of traffic from walkers and bikers, and it kind of goes back to the walkability focus that we had on our previous discussion, and also thinking about the pros plan that we put together. So it kind of, to me, it has a dual win and preserves this other area for potential expansion or use in the next mitigation effort.
Councilmember Henderson?
Thank you. So I'm assuming that parcel 4046, that's completely owned by the city. So whichever one of these options we select, there's no risk that somebody's going to come in and build a condo or a gas station where option number 1 was because we selected option number 2.
That is a city-owned parcel. Yes.
Okay. And I am agreeing with Councilmember Barber in that Some of the costs could be reduced if this were made, the actual enhancement were done by citizen groups or Boy Scouts or something awesome like that. Under the direction, of course, of the city and however we're going to do it. But
It's a good Eagle Scout project.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. That might be kind of neat.
Any other comments from council? And Marcos, are you wanting, like a consensus vote for option 1 or 2 at this point? Or is this kind of just to think about and come back to council, or have them come back to staff?
I would appreciate a consensus at this time, because once we get that consensus or directive, then I will contact the consultant, who will then put together a mitigation plan that will be submitted to the Corps of Engineers. And that will, well, I don't want to say expedite, but it will allow the Corps of Engineers to provide a response to our permit application.
Okay, Councilmember Henderson?
Thanks. So we haven't heard from our professionals. Do you have a preference? I mean, we have our own preferences here, but you're the ones that have looked at this a lot longer than we have. And I mean, we're being presented some information, but my suspicion is you guys have talked about this a lot longer. Do you have any recommendations?
Well, I would recommend option 1 myself because of the limited impact to the site. Any future expansion of the treatment plant would be inhibited by option 2. And so I think I think that it'd be a fairly low cost, even if the contractor performed the work, it would still be a fairly low cost mitigation option. But I think having volunteer groups, Boy Scout, Eagle Scout projects do something like this is also a great idea.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Wood?
Oh, yes, I'm going to speak again for option 2 because our community complains a lot about the traffic. And the current treatment plant is going to take care of what is in the UGA. We have plenty of space in the current treatment plant, but if some other zoning is taken out of the hands of the Gig Harbor City staff, then we need to look at that. And I think every time you talk to our citizens, they say, please slow down this growth. Please slow down this growth. And this is one way we can actually slow down a little bit. We still have a lot of in there. We're still going to build a lot. Because we can handle the UGA, we have to handle what was in East Gig Harbor. So there is a lot of capacity, but this at least would send a message to our citizens that we are listening to you and that we are doing everything within our power to do what we can in case the state comes in and takes away single family zoning, or in case the state comes in and does a lot of takes away a lot of our ability to zone in Gig Harbor. So again, I'm in favor of option 2. Thanks.
Okay, so we have 1 council member in favor of 1 and 1 and 2. So I guess just show of physical hands for option 1. If you're preferring option 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Show of hands for option 2. 1, 2. So I know Councilmember Rodenberg is not here, so majority is for option 1. So I think we'll go with that direction for now, and then let us know, Marcos and Jeff, if anything comes up. And we'll try to, of course, we're keeping on top of legislation as best we can, hoping for the best for this next long session that's going to start in January for retaining local control. So thank you, council, for that direction. Thank you, Marcos and Jeff, for being here to answer questions and presenting. Appreciate you both so much.
Thank you.
And then we will move on to the 4th discussion item, which is our Prentice Avenue, Fenimore Street half-width roadway improvements grant application. And this presentation is our Associate Engineer, Stephanie Siebel.
Thank you, Mayor Markley. Good afternoon, Council. Yes, today I'm here to request authorization to go for a grant for the Prentice Fenimore project that will be running from Harbor Ridge Middle School to Fenimore and down Fenimore to Peacock Hill as discussed earlier. This project construction costs right now are running about $1.7 million estimated at 30%. With costs of inflation right now going up, it is anticipated that this could possibly reach up to $1.8 to $2 million by the time we construct the project. Currently, the project has not been budgeted for construction in the city's budget. And we have an opportunity to go for a state and federally funded grant program called Safe Routes to School, which we can apply for the full amount. This grant part does not require a local match of any kind, but any match that we do have will give us extra points in the evaluation of the funding. The money that we are currently spending to complete design will count as that match towards our application. This program, as mentioned, is both state and federally funded. So we will not know which funding we will get if we are awarded until July of 2023, because this is a biennium budget and they don't announce it until July 1. Because of this, if we go for this grant, the implications of this are we'd have to make the project federally funded processes all the way throughout, starting now with design, because it is easier to do the documentation as we go instead of having to go back and recreate the documentation if we find out we do have federally funded. So it is a little bit higher cost up front, but we've already budgeted that in the design that you've already approved at previous council set meeting. But it saves us more time in the long run and money. Two, it also will delay the construction of the project. Right now, it is anticipated to construct the project in the summer of 2023. However, if we are awarded this grant, we will not be able to bid the project until after we have a grant agreement in place at the end of July of 2023. So this would push out construction until July of 2020 or until summer of 2024. Not a whole year. Right now, as you mentioned earlier, this project is not in our TIP. If we are awarded funds in this program, it will have to be added to our TIP to be for the final qualification for the grant. Right now, except for the schedule lining up, this project ticks all of the boxes required for the Safe Routes to School, which is to enable and encourage children, including those with disabilities, to walk, roll, and bicycle to school, make bicycling and walking to school a safer and more appealing form of transportation, encouraging a healthy and active lifestyle from an early age, and facilitate the planning and development and implementation of projects and activities that will improve safety and reduce traffic, fuel consumption, and air pollution. You also have to be within 2 miles of a school to qualify for this grant, which we are right in their front door. This is not a cash upfront program, so any costs incurred prior to the approval of this grant are not reimbursed. So that is one reason why we may not bid the project until after we are awarded the grants. They announced the initial list that goes to the governor in December of 2022. And the governor and the legislature have until July 1 of 2023 to make their final determination of who stays on the list or not. Currently, the project has, or the grant has been told that they're going to be getting $59 million for the 2023-25 biennium. They don't anticipate that being reduced by the legislature because they've never done that in the past. They've only increased it. Grant applications are due June 6th. So I'm asking for you today of either a vote of we can move forward, and I will put it on the council for the next council agenda, or to not go forward with it and we budget it completely for the city budget to pay for it. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Stephanie. That was a great report. I just want to add that this is, as you probably could tell, a competitive grant application. We will be competing up against all these other projects. There is a lot of money available, but we've looked at the accident history in this corridor, and we don't have the accident history, which is a good thing, but it also makes it less competitive because the more accidents you have, the more competitive it is, because the project itself will have a bigger impact. And so there are many other areas that are putting projects forward, I'm sure, that will have accident history as part of their grading and competitive advantage.
Jeff, may I add to that, that one thing that they have allowed us to do for that, to address that issue of no accident history, is to find areas within the state that do have history that are similar, and we can put this forward as a preventative, or we're going ahead and doing this before we get that bad type of project to get the points.
That would be great. Thank you.
Councilmember Storsett.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie, for going over that. As a resident of Prentice Avenue, I'm excited about this. Came talk to council before when we were trying to get this rolling last year. So love hearing the progress. Appreciate the work that you guys have done with having the open house. Again, sorry I was not able to attend, but I've had many conversations with neighbors on the street. And there has been a couple of accidents here, whether they became police reports or not, on that area where we're doing the widening of the road to the east and putting, it looks like there's going to be a somewhat of a berm there, or a protective layer. There has been cars that have gone off of that because they go around the corner too fast. They don't realize how sharp it is. And coming from my safety background, you don't always have an accident, but you can have near misses. And as we heard from a resident in the last city council meeting who, came with the document in hand and showed some pictures, I'll tell you, it does get a little dicey out there in the morning. I always turn left and avoid the middle school in the morning, and I do the same thing and go around on Harbor View when I'm coming back at night, so you don't have to deal with the traffic. A lot of drop-offs and pickups. And then you throw a sporting event in there like we had on Saturday, and the whole road is covered with vehicles. So there's really only one lane down the middle because the cars that are, there's a parking issue. And I kind of agree with that at Harbor Ridge in some of these events. We've seen it also on, it's weekends, fortunately, versus like weekdays, which is a plus. But, basketball on a Saturday, for example, we had 6 cars in our driveway, people just asking to, friends asking to park here. So don't know that we need to go to the extent of adding more street parking. I like this plan the way that it is now, but I think there's some other things that we need to address here. And, some of that stuff with the one-way traffic. And I know Chief Busey was going by there earlier this week to kind of witness some of it. But there's some concern. I'll tell you, a lot of these are parents that are in a hurry. And sometimes it's also the older sibling that's in high school trying to, drop their little brother or sister off. And it can get a little scary out there. It makes me concerned until we have a sidewalk when my kids go to Harbor Ridge Middle School eventually, of walking to school, especially around that blind corner, and pretty poor shoulders on both sides for now, but don't want to, I know we'll keep going on this one for a little bit, but I think there's some great progress here. Other question, I think we have talked about this before on this project, but obviously going after this grant includes, there's a higher cost, right? Because of the planning portion of it. And it also does create a delay. I would be curious on our confidence level of, do we think that we just didn't pull this out of city funds or seek the grant? Are we going in a route that might lead to delays and not getting this, in place earlier? So again, look for your guys's, expertise and knowledge on this to inform us. Thanks.
Stephanie, would you mind reminding us when the governor's office is going to make the decision on rankings and moving projects forward?
Yes, the way that the State Back to School coordinator explained it is they have until December 31st to give their ranked list to the governor.
Yeah, December 31st of 2022.
Correct. And then between then and July 1st, he and the legislature go through the list. And so whenever he forwards his transportation budget to the legislature for their approval, that's when his list gets forwarded. So she said, we'll know by December 31st, 2022, if we've made the list above the line from the program itself. We just won't know until July 1st if we've made the final list.
So one option the city could consider, and I don't mean to interrupt the questions that are going to come, but one option the city could consider is to proceed with design and permitting as if it's a federal project, which will cost more to design and permit, but then decide after that list is provided to the governor's office in December, whether or not where we sit on that list, and if we want to wait to see if we're going to be successful with obtaining the money, or if we're so far down the list that it's highly unlikely we could go out to bid and just have it funded with full city funds if they are available to the project. So I'll just say that and then I'll stop talking.
Another option that Trent had come up with, Jeff, too, for budgeting is take two paths where we go down the path of going for the grant, treating it like a federal project, at the same time also budget it in the budget. So if we don't get the grant, we are still on schedule to construct it. And then if we do get the grant, that money can then be moved to other projects.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Support that option that Trent has proposed.
To answer the other part of your question, Councilman Storsett, about our confidence, we don't take going for federal grants lightly because it's a lot of extra work and we only go for it if we can apply for it all or nothing. And this project does check all the boxes for the program, the Safe Routes to School program. The only thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't align with our schedule for construction.
Councilmember Henderson.
Thanks. So question, I wasn't able to go to the open house that you had, and I guess Seth couldn't make it either. Was anything promised or told to the residents timeline on this? Because if we said, yeah, we're going to start this puppy in early June or something, and now we're going to come back and say, well, we may have to wait till July 2023 to find out, and then we won't maybe get started till 2024 because of everything else. I just want to make sure that the city hasn't made any kind of a promise of a date to start the project, and now we're going to go say, gosh, it may be for some people a lot longer. If we were to wait for the funding and either didn't get it or we do get it, but it still sounds like if we wait to find out whether we got it or not, or we get it, we're still in the same boat, right? Unless we just say, let's budget it within the city, do it ourselves. And I mean, I think what Trent came up with a kind of a two parallel paths. If you have the resources to actually do that, that's probably the best. It kind of covers both bases, but I just want to make sure that we hadn't promised something to the residents up there that it would be done earlier.
That's a great question. That question did come up during the open house.
I'm sure.
And the way I answered it was, right now we are on schedule to anticipated to construct it in 2023, unless we go for grant funding that would push it out to 2023.
Okay, so at least you hedged your bets and didn't promise that.
Right.
I just don't, it is never good if we promise something and then we have to go back on it. People lose faith in the government and the.
Right.
So.
And the people did respond back with grants are always good.
That's right.
Councilmember Wook.
Yeah, thank you. I was at that open house and that's what they did respond with. Grants are always good. And so it was made clear, I believe, that the city was going to try to go for a grant for this project. Do we know how much this project would cost if we didn't go for the federal grant and we funded it in-house ourselves?
The construction costs are still the same, the 1.7. The part that it would reduce is the design time, the design funds that have already been approved.
So that's really not saving us a lot of money. The only thing it saves us is time. Although if we don't construct this from federally funds, by the time 2 years go by, construction costs could be even more, right?
Yes, and that's why I had mentioned earlier with inflation and the extra time, it could grow to 1.8 to $2 million.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Those about the accidents, and that we can use other areas that do have like this, that are similar, that do have accidents, and we can show that we will not have these accidents with this. Have we found areas within the state that do have accidents that we can use for that? We can use that information for?
I personally haven't looked yet.
Okay.
So I'm not aware of. Jeff, are you aware of any areas in the state that they keep track?
I have not looked yet either.
Is there a clearinghouse?
That Washington State Patrol does track all accident history police reports, and we can filter through that data. And so it'll take some work to go through.
And
But that's the only
Washington
thing
also
we're
has
really
some.
lacking in this application, right?
Yes, but let me check one thing really quick. Safety is the biggest percentage of the review criteria, but it's not, crash patterns isn't the only criteria underneath that safety title. There's crash history, local road safety plan, our level of traffic stress, and our speed management also. So there's other areas that if we are lacking, we can try to boost maybe like our speed management, because we have many people, as even Councilmember Storsett mentioned, complaining about speeding down that road.
Right. Thank you for the open house. You did a great job, and thanks for the presentation today. I followed Trent's, I think, recommendation maybe, or that we see what we look like after December 31st and where we are on the list, and budget for it in the budget, in the biannual budget, so that the money is there if we need to use it. I'm in favor of that. Thank you.
I do want to know one question you had, Councilmember Wook, was about existing budget and whether or not we have capacity based on federalizing the project. There are some costs that will come into play related to temporary construction easements. Any construction easements we'll have to obtain. Federal process requires us to obtain an appraiser and pay for temporary construction easements and permanent construction easements if we need any. The local process doesn't require us to do that. We can, and we usually do, negotiate with property owners, showing them the added value. If we need an easement, either temporary or permanent easement, and we don't pay for those. So that will be a cost we will incur if any easements are necessary.
Do we have any idea how much that cost is?
I want to say for Rosedale Stinson, that cost was in the tens of thousands of dollars, not in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
All right, thank you very much.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you, Stephanie and Jeff too, for the presentation. It's really interesting and kind of a little bit of a dilemma, but I guess I come down on the side of safety. And I'm really concerned about what I'm hearing from Councilmember Storsett and also other neighbors in this area who have students who are young children who are trying to walk on this street, and there hasn't been anyone, quite honestly, killed yet, but I'm afraid there's going to be from what I'm hearing. And I think that we have a duty to try to mitigate that as quickly as we can with a judicious use of taxpayer dollars. So I guess I'm in favor of the, I think it's Trent's plan, the plan that moves us forward on trying to design based on federal guidelines and that kind of thing, hoping that we can get the money and seeing where we are at the end of this year. But I really want us to keep this moving as quickly as we can. And I don't know if there's anything else we can do with Chifusi or anything like that to make it safer for the kids, especially the young kids, to get back and forth to school. It's really concerning to me. So I'd like us to move as quickly as we can without spending money in an unwise manner. And I like Trent's plan.
Just so council's aware, I did have a conversation with Chief Busey this morning. He went out there yesterday and met with the resident that came to talk with us, as well as the assistant principal and principal. And he actually gave a couple of really good suggestions that could be implemented to try to help mitigate that situation at the school. Most likely, it wouldn't be put in place until the next school year because we only have about a month left of this year, and it would be hard to do signs and striping and any changes that might be necessary. So probably wouldn't start till next school year, but there are some things that could really help that the principal and assistant principal were open to discussing further and looking into. So he's on it and taking it seriously and trying to see what we can do to help solve that, at least temporarily make it a little easier. So just to update you on that, Councilmember Dorset.
That's great news too, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you for that update. Yeah, I just wanted to add in, I know I already made comments, so here I go again, but if there's any way that I can, I know this is all of the council, weighing in on this, but if there's any way I can be of support, I agree with Mary's comments on let's see where this goes, but let's not waste any time. I really like the idea of some of these mitigation practices that we could have for the following school year. I think that's part of our responsibility too. We might have a grand vision in mind, but there might be some things that we do along the way that can, maybe better prepare us for it and create some more safety. Also, just want to offer up, I do have a large driveway. So Jeff, if you need a temporary easement for this project, I will give you a portion of my driveway if you need to store some equipment. I'm just looking for a reduction in my stormwater bill that will be changing here pretty soon. But I'm sure we can work something out. All right, that was a joke. I'm not really soliciting that. All right, thanks.
Councilmember Likens.
Oh gosh, that's great, Seth. So Jeff, I just had a question. I know Public Works, you guys are down positions, particularly with engineers, and the federal guidelines, and I've written grants before, it can be a fair amount of work. What do you think the impact, if you are going to go for this grant, would be to your staff time right now?
Well, yeah, I would say fairly significant. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So they're actually using this year SurveyMonkey for the grant application. And they've tried to make it as easy as possible on the application participants. So basically, as you go through and answer the questions, it changes to what program, because it's Safe Routes to School and also the pedestrian and bicycle programming. That's not the full name of it, but we don't qualify for that one, but it's both programs in the same application. So as you go through and answer the questions, it changes the questions. And a lot of them are very short answers to me, because that was brought up during the webinar that, hey, you're having your webinars now and this grant application is due in like a month or two, and some of us have to get authorization to go for it. And they've mentioned that they've tried to make it as easy as possible, knowing that they have a very, very short timeline to get it in.
And Jeff, do you feel you have the staff to do this extra work that's needed?
I think we can work with the consultant to provide us additional support, but it's not scoped.
Okay.
So it's one of those, I mean, the question was, is it going to cost us more money? The consultant's going to likely be the one to help us with this, and therefore we're going to have a much higher, well, a higher bill from them. Don't know how much. We haven't, I don't think, Stephanie, we've requested a scope from them to do this through a federal process or to support us through the grant application process.
Okay,
I have not requested that scope.
But the benefits, hopefully, well, with this large of a project, would be greater than the expenses of the engineering.
Oh, for sure, because if they truly are going to fund a majority or all of the construction costs, I mean, it's really hard to turn away that, because we could definitely reallocate that elsewhere.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't saying this is a great idea and you have to push everything out to the side to get it done. So great, thank you.
Okay, so is the general consensus of council to go forward with the plan Trent Ward suggested in terms of going to December And then seeing where we are at that point. Okay, so I'm looking like that's the consensus here. Councilmember Wook.
And also put it in the budget for next year in case we,
Yes.
in case we need it.
Yes,
Yes,
we,
Ourselves.
The
yes,
parallel path.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mhm.
you will see it identified as a construction project in the budget for 2023-24 biennium, as if it's going to be funded by city funds.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Jeff.
And if you do talk a little bit associated with this, she did also tell everybody that if you do talk to your legislatures, representatives, let them know, because they're always telling them, hey, you're not making it easy for these local agencies with their construction schedules, with the way that, how long they take. Let them know that if it'd be nice if they could make their decision a lot earlier, because then we wouldn't have to make these decisions. That would help us
All
out
right.
too. So, thank you for that.
We'll do some letter writing and some phone calling.
All
All
right,
right,
thank you.
great. Thank you. So we're on to our final agenda item, our 2022 active CIP schedule update from our Public Works Director, Jeff Langholm.
Thank you, Mayor. I see we're a little short on time. I'm not sure if there's anybody who has to leave us at 5, but I will try and move quickly through this. Hopefully you've seen already the document with the CIP schedule and the public outreach matrix. I'm going to share my screen here. It's going to show it. And I'm going to move through this fairly quickly. Again, highlighted items are the ones that have changed from last month when we presented this. So starting at the top, construction. This project actually was moved up a little bit. I believe this is the one that was moved. It was supposed to actually have a construction later in the year, and we moved it up just due to timing for construction for Scansey Net Shed. So we are proceeding with that, working with a consultant. I'm going to jump down to the, let's see, Ansich human-powered waterfront storage racks. This project is all but done. You won't see this again. The racks are in. The public has been oriented, thanks to Matt and Scott Keeley, to let everybody know that their racks are open and available. And they have their door access codes and moving forward. So the group that is storing boats in the building will be in there through December, the end of December. And then the plan is to have a new group selected after January. Councilmember Storsett.
Yeah, so did we fill those out entirely? Are we generating some good funds off of it? Was there a bit of a backlog?
I think the total number of people that applied, maybe Josh can remind me, I think it was in the 70s, and we have 40 slots. So we had definitely more people wanting space than boat slots were available.
Great. Follow-on question. I don't know that there's really room for it, but would we ever could we consider ever adding more storage racks to that facility if these numbers stay up? Is there space?
There isn't space. No, we're going to look at, we have one extra rack in case the boat sizes change, reduced or something. So we bought one extra rack and some extra arms in case boat sizes were ever changing. But we're going to use this first cycle as an opportunity to see if we can increase the density on some of those. But everybody's boat is a little bit different in size, so that makes it a challenge. And the question is every 6 months, do we want to completely revamp and reformulate our layout of our racks, both the arms and the locations? So we're going to see if we can increase that number next time. But for right now, we're keeping, I think, at 40 or 42 or something.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I had some people ask like, oh, I didn't get in on that first one. How do I get a space? Well, they're going to add more. So I can follow up.
There are some building code requirements. We can't go higher. If you go in there, you're like, well, you've got a lot more room to go up to the ceiling. A building code doesn't allow us to do that. So, and just the overall reality of how high can people lift their boats. So
true.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
You bet. I'm going to jump down to the Austin Honoring Art. As you've seen, the preloading of the location for foundation is still occurring. We're having a pre-construction meeting on this project, I think next week. Let me double check my calendar. Yes, pre-construction meeting next week, and then the contractor will give us a schedule of when they'll be out there. We still think that we'll be able to have the artwork in place ideally by the end of June or first part of July, and then work with the Puyallup tribe to have the unveiling and set for July. Commercial fishing home port, that's proceeding. I expect to have 60% design plans and specs by the end of the month. You will see, if you haven't seen already, there's a study session on this topic with council on June 16th study session. It's going to be a study session where actually I was going to invite and make sure, unless there's opposition, invite the commercial fishing folks to come and talk at that study session. We usually don't have members of the public talk, but since they're a party that's participating with us on this, we wanted them to be able to have a conversation with council. They're going to have a chance to review that 60% design, and they provided us one round of comments already, and they're going to provide us another round. But we want to be able to talk and we'll present for the 16th meeting the preliminary design and cost estimates to see where we're going with this. In the middle of federal permitting, trying to find mitigation. What we're looking at now is beach nourishment. We know that we can't, based on the formulas that the federal government uses for mitigation, we're not going to be able to find enough overwater coverage to mitigate, because the formula, I think, is either 5-to-1 or 6-to-1 amount of overwater coverage we need to eliminate from the bay. And that's just going to be virtually impossible. So we're looking at beach nourishment on city beaches. Councilmember Wook.
Do we have any idea? I think some grants have been applied for this project. Do we know where they stand?
We applied to the Port of Tacoma for a design and permitting grant. I think it was for $40,000 or $50,000. I'm waiting to hear back formally from Port of Tacoma. The fishermen have told me they've talked to the Port of Tacoma and they just need to finalize their process, and they will get back to us. But we are going to receive some amount of money for design and permitting. And then we're going to be asking, I'm sure in early 2023 for construction funds from the Port of Tacoma.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna move down to the next page. Bogue visitors. Oh, Councilmember Henderson.
Just a quick question, Jeff. Did we get that third charging station for the Civic Center electrical vehicle charging station? Remember we talked about it, the contractor sent 3 and you only ordered 2?
It was actually, we ordered 1 and the contractor and the purchaser provider vendor provided us with 2. And yes, we do have the 2 in inventory. I'm working with operations to try and make sure that we have sufficient amperage up to those 2 sites so that we can keep with that level 2 charging station. With staffing levels, this one is likely going to slip. I know that we're going to try and get through the design by early June, but with current staffing levels, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. As a side note, I know we talked about engineering staff levels. We are down 3 maintenance techs, 2 laborers, and as of the end of this month, we'll be down a field supervisor. Our field supervisor, Jim Stanton, is retiring after 31 years with the city. So we're running even thinner in operations than we have been recently.
We need more people.
Yeah. And the positions are there. I mean, I'm not asking for more. It's trying to, well, and I as a side note, very excited to continue to work now with Shannon and to acquire people. Shannon in HR analyst and Desiree, HR assistant. They've been very, very helpful. So, but we're moving forward in that direction. Okay, back to Bogue visitors. This project, we're continuing to move forward with it. After initial review by the consultant on the structure itself, found a few issues that we're going to have to get resolved before we go out to bid, and talking with our building permit about those. So, but we're moving forward. Public Works Operations Center, we are just waiting for final approval from the building permit. We keep pushing this out because we keep waiting for that final building permit approval. But I on a daily basis, I guarantee you, David Boyer is tired of seeing my face and me asking, where are we with this? So anyway, we really need to get out to bid with this quick, because if we don't get out to bid, we're going to be going up out of the ground in November, and I don't want that to happen. I'm going to go ahead and jump down. We talked about Harborview Stinson a lot lately. Rosedale Stinson, you saw in the public outreach document probably that there's no change there. We're continuing to negotiate with the contractor on that item with the related to the streetlights. Pavement maintenance, we're getting ready to award that contract. Open bids here soon. Mid-block crossing for the 2 locations we talked about. Those are proceeding into design. Boy, I should have remembered what this looked like. I can't remember if this one, I think this one moved out a little bit, a couple months or a couple weeks. That's why it's highlighted. Okay, Prentice Fenimore, boy, we've talked about that a lot, but there's our construction schedule right now based off of not having federal grants allocated to this project. Jumping down to water projects. Oh, Councilmember Henderson.
Just a question on 38th Avenue improvements. There's a lot of big trees along that stretch. Are we going to do what we can to retain as many as we can?
Yes, that's going to be a topic for upcoming study session. The 30th Avenue Corridor Phase 2, all of you are very familiar with this corridor between 56th and Hunt Street. A lot of trees along that corridor, and the plan initially has always been to put sidewalks on the east side of the road, so where Fox Run was constructed recently. There are, as you also know, there are a lot of mature native trees along that side, and our standard roadway section, as you see in front of Fox Run, is fairly wide through there with the planter strip or sidewalk, streetlights, and or a swale, bioswale. If we continue with that standard roadway section and continue with the same standards that we have for tree removals, whenever we get under the drip line of those trees, you can imagine most of those fir trees on that corridor on the west, or on the east side, are going to come out, because a lot of those residential subdivisions have houses right up within the right up against those trees. So it's going to be a discussion we're going to have with council to see how we want to proceed with that. I'm bringing Community Development Director Knutson into the conversation also, because she would need to have a conversation about tree retention standards and everything else. Stephanie.
We also have asked the consultants that we are currently negotiating the scope with to include an arborist in the scope to come out.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Moving down to Reed Drive, water main improvements, still progressing with this one. Stephanie, maybe if you're, did this one get moved out a little bit in timing for construction?
Yes, it got moved to go to bid early June.
Okay.
A bid opening of late June, and council at the July 11th.
Okay. So progressing, again, a challenging project, but we're progressing on this one. Let's see. Oh, I skipped lift station 6 at the bottom. I wanted to show you, I know that we didn't have any changes to lift station 6, but I just wanted to stop sharing this schedule and show you just some progress. If you haven't been down there, it's just a quick couple pictures here. Okay, so this is the lift station. If you are on Ryan Street looking toward the water, this is what the lift station looks like. This is all of the underground facility. You can see the piping on the side, and then access and vents here. I'm going to switch. Let me see if I can. No, it's not going to. I have to stop my sharing and switch to a different picture. So this is looking in the opposite direction. You're looking uphill now. This is the stairs going down in the lift station. You can see the doors here where all the control room is going to be. And the next big stage in this process is going to be putting in, I think George said it was a 13-foot diameter caisson that they have to drill. I thought it was 15 to 16 feet deep. So it's going to be, the next step is going to be a big one. but then the contractor is moving forward slowly. They've had some staffing issues also, but we're trying to get through this one. And yes, Councilmember Barber.
Yes, on the house that is right next to that project, is that house, did they sell? Is it vacant? Or, I mean, it's been quite a time for them, shall we say, or what is the situation there?
The
I've had a
last
couple
I
of people
heard,
ask me because we live near there.
yeah, so the last I've heard, but that was probably a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, the property did sell between the time we finalized design and the time construction started. The new property owners were away for a while, and they've just recently returned. So I know that we're trying to work with them as much as possible. I can show that picture again. There is some impacts right against their property.
Yeah, there are, definitely.
Yeah, but I don't know how much of those impacts are on their property or just appear to be on their property, but within right of way. The right of way is pretty wide through there. But
Okay, thank you.
yep, you bet. Okay, I'm gonna go back to sharing our schedule. Yes. Last few tasks, Murphy's Landing, that is now in the hands of federal permitting agencies. So we will be waiting to see when we hear back from them. And once we receive final approval for all of the permits, this will be in the hands of the Murphy's Landing Marina itself to complete the construction. Wastewater treatment plant digester, that's delayed a little bit just because our wastewater crews are doing other things, and trying to also procure some materials is taking, of course, a lot longer than we thought. Let's see, and then other department tasks, utility rate studies, just trying to get to that with all the other priorities coming into us. The consultant has provided me with some draft documents. I need to go through those and evaluate those and then set a study session up with council. I wasn't going to go through the public outreach matrix. I do have it available if you'd like to see it, but I was just, I think most of you have probably read this, and happy to answer any questions if you have any. I know it's getting late.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Any questions from council on the CIP or the matrix? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much, Jeff, for this presentation and update. As always, it is really great to hear what you all are doing and keeping us very informed on progress going forward. So we know your plates are very full, and we know you're understaffed, and we're working very hard to help you in that department. So thank you again. And if there's nothing else for the good of the order, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, have a great evening, everyone. Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
bye, everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.